The British kitchen in the 1970s looked completely different. Different colors, different smells, different rules. Almost everything was brown, orange, or avocado green. Ashtrays sat beside the sugar bowl. Wallpaper covered walls that would horrify people today. And somehow, every kitchen felt permanently warm. But near the end of this list is one thing almost every British home had that completely disappeared from modern kitchens, even though people used it every single day. Once you see it, you'll instantly remember it. Here are 15 things every British kitchen had in the 1970s. 15. Avocado green appliances. If you walked into a British kitchen in the 1970s, there was a very high chance something was avocado green. The fridge, the kettle, the cooker, sometimes even the sink. Modern kitchens aim for clean whites and greys. The 1970s did the opposite. Color was everywhere. Here's the fascinating part. By the mid-1970s, avocado green and harvest gold became two of the best-selling appliance colors in Britain and America combined. Entire kitchens were designed around matching color schemes, and once you notice it in old photographs, you start seeing it everywhere. But color didn't stop with the appliances. The walls became just as dramatic. 14. Loud patterned wallpaper. 1970s kitchens were rarely subtle. Wallpaper exploded across British homes during the decade. Huge flowers, brown swirls, orange geometric patterns. Every surface competed for attention. Wallpaper sat beside patterned curtains and tablecloths, and somehow it all made sense at the time. Here's an interesting fact. DIY home decoration became hugely popular during the 1970s as more British families could finally afford to personalize their homes after decades of post-war austerity. But one kitchen item from the 70s was less decorative and far more dangerous. 13. The chip pan. Before air fryers, there was the chip pan. A metal pot filled with boiling oil sitting directly on the hob. Nearly every British household had one. Homemade chips became a staple of family life. But chip pans were incredibly dangerous. If the oil overheated, it could burst into flames within seconds. Here's the shocking statistic. Chip pans caused thousands of house fires across Britain during the 1970s and 1980s. But despite the danger, people kept using them. Because homemade chips tasted completely different from modern oven chips. But not everything in the 70s kitchen involved cooking. Some things were there purely for appearance. 12. Decorative tea cozies. The tea cozy was everywhere. Knitted covers sat proudly on teapots across Britain. Some looked simple, others looked bizarre. Dolls, animals, bright knitted patterns, and they served a genuine purpose. Keeping tea warm mattered in homes where kettles rarely stopped boiling. Here's the interesting part. Britain consumed over 165 million cups of tea per day during the 1970s. Tea wasn't just a drink, it was part of daily life. But sitting nearby was something almost impossible to imagine in a modern kitchen. 11. Ashtrays on the kitchen table. Smoking in the kitchen was completely normal in the 1970s. Ashtrays sat beside the sugar bowl. Parents smoked while cooking. Visitors smoked while drinking tea. And children simply sat nearby, breathing it all in. Here's the remarkable statistic. In the mid-1970s, around 45% of British adults smoked regularly. Smoke filled pubs, offices, restaurants, and kitchens. Curtains absorbed it, wallpaper absorbed it. Looking back now, it feels unbelievable how normal it seemed. But another object sitting in many kitchens looks strange even back then. 10. Wall-mounted can openers. Many 1970s kitchens had can openers permanently attached to the wall. Heavy metal devices bolted beside counters. You clipped the tin underneath and slowly turned a handle by hand, and because canned food became hugely popular during the 60s and 70s, these things got used constantly. Beans, soup, spaghetti hoops, tinned fruit. Here's an interesting fact. The rise of supermarkets during the 1970s massively increased canned and packaged food sales across Britain. Convenience food became modern, but one kitchen feature from the 70s disappeared for a very obvious reason. 9. Carpets in the kitchen. Yes, actual carpets. In the kitchen. And somehow people accepted this as normal. The logic made sense at the time. Carpets made homes feel warmer during cold British winters. But kitchens are obviously terrible places for carpet, food spills, grease, tea stains, and yet many homes still had them. Here's the strange part. Fitted carpets became hugely fashionable during the 1970s as Britain embraced softer interiors. For a while, people installed carpets almost everywhere, even bathrooms. And speaking of cozy, the next thing was almost always hanging beside the cooker. 8. Decorative plates on the wall. Many 1970s kitchens treated plates as decoration. Painted plates hung across walls or shelves, often featuring flowers, cottages, or countryside scenes. Some families collected entire matching sets. Others won them through catalogs or petrol station promotions. Here's the fascinating part. Collectible household ornaments became incredibly popular during the 1970s as home ownership increased across Britain. Kitchens became places to display personality, not just places to cook. But one object found in almost every kitchen was purely practical. 7. Brown glass bottles of sauce. Long before endless supermarket choices, many British kitchens relied on the same familiar condiments. Brown sauce, mint sauce, malt vinegar, especially the famous dark glass bottles sitting permanently beside the cooker. Here's an interesting fact. HP sauce had already become one of Britain's most recognizable food brands by the 1970s, and once you picture a full English breakfast from that era, that bottle is usually somewhere nearby. But the next thing in almost every kitchen wasn't food, it was furniture. 6. Formica Tables. The Formica kitchen table became a 1970s icon. Hard, shiny surfaces, metal legs, bright colors. Usually surrounded by matching chairs with uncomfortable plastic cushions. Families ate dinner there every night. Children did homework there. Parents read newspapers there with tea nearby. And because many kitchens were smaller than today, the kitchen table became the center of family life. Here's the interesting part. Formica became hugely popular because it was cheap, durable, and easy to clean, which perfectly suited post-war Britain. But another thing sitting nearby completely disappeared from modern kitchens. 5. Net curtains. Almost every 1970s kitchen window had net curtains. Thin white patterns hanging behind heavier curtains. They allowed light in while stopping neighbors from seeing inside, especially in tightly packed terraced housing. Here's the strange thing. Many families rarely washed them, which meant years of cigarette smoke and cooking smells slowly turned them yellow. But one item from the 70s kitchen still survives today, just in a much smaller form. 4. Giant biscuit tins. Before plastic storage containers took over, biscuit tins ruled British kitchens. Huge metal tins filled with custard creams, bourbons, digestives, and shortbread. And once the biscuits disappeared, the tins stayed forever. Families stored sewing kits, batteries, and receipts inside them. Every British child eventually opened a biscuit tin expecting food and found buttons instead. Here's the interesting part. Brands like Quality Street and Cadbury helped turn decorative tins into permanent household objects. But one thing found in nearly every kitchen created constant background noise. 3. Tick-Tocking kitchen clocks. The 1970s kitchen was never silent, and one reason was the clock. Loud ticking clocks hung on walls across Britain, often shaped like plates or decorative wooden circles. You could hear them constantly, especially late at night when the house became quiet. And because kitchens acted as social spaces, the clock became strangely important. Children watched it before school, parents stared at it waiting for the kettle to boil. But near the end of this list is something every British household used daily that almost vanished completely. 2. The bread bin. The bread bin sat on the kitchen counter like permanent furniture, usually metal, usually cream, orange or brown, and always slightly dented. Bread mattered enormously in British households during the 1970s. Toast. Sandwiches. Beans on toast. Chip butties. Here's an interesting statistic. Britons consumed significantly more bread during the 1970s than today, with the average person eating over 100 loaves per year. And once sliced supermarket bread became common, the bread bin became essential. And finally, the thing almost every British kitchen had. 1. The wooden spoon collection. Every 1970s kitchen seemed to contain multiple wooden spoons, some for cooking, others purely decorative. Souvenir spoons hung on walls or stood in ceramic pots beside the cooker, and somehow every family owned far more than they actually needed. But for many British children, the wooden spoon also carried another meaning entirely, because parents famously threatened to discipline children with it, usually without ever actually doing it. Here's the fascinating part. The wooden spoon became such a recognizable symbol of British parenting during the 60s and 70s that it still appears constantly in nostalgia discussions today. And somehow, that simple kitchen utensil ended up representing an entire generation of British family life. The British kitchen of the 1970s wasn't minimalist, it wasn't subtle, but it was warm, familiar, and full of personality. And looking back now, it feels instantly recognizable. So now we're curious. Which of these things do you remember most? And what else did every British kitchen seem to have in the 1970s? Let us know in the comments.